your take, like how they should approach for the new tasks?
At all the patterns, I'm like, well, I don't think it's confidence because
If a student or young professional, he wants to talk and he talks to you like, hey, that I'm really good in this and that, but I'm not able to cope up with my internal.
I think the first one is expectation management.
Hello, listeners and viewers. Welcome to our new podcast with Analytics Unplugged. And today we have Dr. Katherine Iscoe. She is a renowned expert in realm of self-respect and personal development, and she uh, do so many seminars in Western Australia. She goes to various organizations and institutions to talk about self-respect and how we can cope up with this. And this is a really important aspect. I mean, every one of us work on technical skills and we are really good in Python, for example, but we are not able to express ourselves, we are not able to grow in confidence with the recruiters as well, right? So this is where Dr. Katherine comes in, and welcome, Katherine, to our show.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so today I think the viewers will learn a lot from you, the expertise that you have in this particular field. And I'm sure I still remember when you came to UWA, right? So that was our first session. And yes, I learned a lot from you. The way you were speaking, the confidence in you, and it was lovely. So every one of us really loved it. So I still think like all the viewers will be amazed by what you have to say. So yes, so let's start. So first of all, I just want to know your journey in terms of self-respect and how you came up with this topic and how what kind of journey you have been through.
Oh gosh, I'll try to shorten it as much as I can,
Yeah.
but I think I can summarize it in one statement, which is if you like me, I like me. Meaning that I depended on you to determine who I was as a person. I depended on you to say whether I was important or not. So I didn't
Yeah.
feel important unless someone told me I was important. And so the way I fixed this was through two different mediums. One was through achieving scholarships, A pluses, being the captain of the volleyball team rather than just playing on the volleyball team. And the other
Yeah.
part was through people pleasing, which is basically being hyper vigilant to everyone's emotions or hyper vigilant to how they looked at me or how they behaved in front of me. And I would try to think about what they were thinking about me. But at the end of the day, it's just hypotheses, right? I don't know what you're thinking of me right now, but I would look at every single change in your face and I wouldn't feel good about myself if unless I thought you thought I was something special. So how I came across self-respect was actually 2 years ago, or I guess 2.5 years ago now, which is I was repeating the same patterns that I did my entire life, which was I'm going to do what I think you think I should do, and I will depend on making sure that you like me. And basically the way to say it, I had a bit of an emotional breakdown and I did the most adult thing I could
Mhm.
think of, which was to run away back home to Canada. And I think everyone
Yeah.
probably on this call, at one point of their life when they're not feeling good about themselves, all they want to do is go home to something familiar. But this was the
Right.
best thing that I could have done because it was the distance that allowed me to really look at my part in what happened. And really, what happened was when I looked at my career, I was just saying yes to whatever people thought I should do, whether that's what I was talking about, what I was doing, how much I was charging. And also in regards to the relationships that I had, my partner and I sort of fell apart. And thankfully, that was the best thing that happened to us. We were stronger than ever now. But when I was looking at all the patterns, I'm like, well, I don't think it's confidence because Lord knows I don't need any more confidence because confidence is
Okay.
the ability to trust oneself to give something a go. It's the perfect Australian statement to give something a go before you're ready. Self-esteem is whether or not you like yourself. And I've been through 3 very dark periods of my life where I didn't like myself. I'm like, mm-mm, I know how it
Mhm.
feels to have low self-esteem. So that couldn't be it. And it wasn't self-worth, because self-worth is the ability to see your own value. And I was getting beautiful messages from people, and I knew I was intelligent enough to provide value to people. So I'm like, no, it wasn't that. And so my dad and I started talking, and he reminded me of this quote, "To thine own self be true." And this was really the catalyst for me to ask question, well, if it's not confidence, it's not self-esteem and not self-worth, I wonder what else it could be. To thine own self be true means to be honest with yourself, and therefore you can be honest with each other. And to respect oneself, only then can you respect the people around you. So this sort of catalyzed all my research into self-respect. And the quote meant so much to me that I got my dad to write it down on a piece of paper 10 times. And then I got
Yeah.
it tattooed on my,
Wow. Yeah.
this is my dad's writing. So he's
Okay.
always there with me.
Amazing. So yeah, I think it's all about the journey. Like whenever you face something and then you realize this is right, this is wrong, and then you try to work around and maybe come to some conclusion that yes, this is good for me, right? So
Yeah.
is this journey tough? Like I mean, of course you have been through your journey, but in general, for example, if I'm a student, I'm 19 years of age. I'm
Mhm.
new to this world. Of course, it's not easy, right? So for them, what's your take? Like how they should approach for the new tasks or anything in their personal life or career, how they can overcome all those things.
I think the best thing I can say is basically you're asking, like, okay, how can I do well at what I want to do? And I think, especially, it sounds to me that your audience is quite high achievers in the sense that they're constantly
Yeah,
looking to do more and to be more and to get to that next level. And
right,
oftentimes, what happens is, especially in universities, we start comparing ourselves to the graduate students or the professors, and then we're like, well, we're not as smart as them, or we haven't accomplished as much as them. We haven't published as much as them. We haven't coded to their level. So we just say, well, we're not them. So maybe we shouldn't say anything. And I always say, just because you're not the smartest, the most experienced, or the best person in the room doesn't mean you shouldn't contribute or doesn't mean you don't deserve to be there. So it's swapping your perspective in the sense of, I wonder how much I can learn rather than I wonder how much I don't know. So it's really expectation management. And I wish I had someone that told me that, because throughout my undergrad and my master's and my PhD, all I was focusing on is what I don't know and what I couldn't understand and what I didn't do right. And it is exhausting, absolutely exhausting. So it's more like, it's interesting. It's more of a, hey, I have a glass half empty that I can fill up.
yeah,
Like my glass
right,
is already half full. What can you add to that? But it's
right.
so hard, would you not say, in academia, especially because it's all to do with how much you know. I found it very exhausting. I don't know if you find it exhausting too, in regards to just the cerebral brain power that you need.
Right. So, anyways, we need someone who can guide us in between if we are stuck somewhere. So, is that
Yeah.
something on which we can work on?
Listen, I will never. There's two things. One, a therapist. I think everyone should go to see a therapist. Oh, there we go. There's
There we
a
go. Yes, like
there, thumbs up.
yeah,
A
yeah,
therapist, a counselor, a mentor, but someone who can give you objective feedback, not advice, objective feedback, rather
yeah.
than a best friend or a parent. Because the thing is, they're always going to look at it from your perspective rather than multiple perspectives. And you cannot just tell someone what they already know. You have to give them sort of questions and prompting examples to say, oh, I wonder, I haven't considered that. So I'll give you an example. So I remember this is in undergrad, and I don't know if you guys have this still, but when you did exams, you filled in what's called a Scantron sheet. So it's an
Hmm.
ants like it's just a whole bunch of dots, and you have to do it with a
Yeah,
pencil.
it's like OCR sheet.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
we
So
need to fill the circles. Yes.
okay. So what happened? This was on my anatomy test. Instead of answering one on one, I skipped a row. So then all my answers were one
Oh,
off.
yeah,
So I remember looking at the results when they came out, and I got 36%. It was a fail. And I remember my girlfriend who I was living with came home. She thought someone had died in my family because I was
hmm,
white, I was shaking.
yeah,
And if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have thought this doesn't make sense. I have A pluses. I get 98% on my exams. This is
yeah,
the level. And it wasn't for her to say, go talk to your prof. This doesn't sound correct. So, getting that perspective change, and this is just a very small example of many,
right.
and a very, very objective example, but what can your audience do, or who can they talk to ask those questions for you to see a different perspective when you're looking at the same thing?
Right. Totally understand what you're saying. I can totally
Mhm.
relate. I mean, it's really hard when you feel that you can achieve this, but somehow with some silly mistake or some XYZ reasons, you are unable to reach at that level. So yeah, it's really hard, and then we have to work around on that. So,
Mhm.
so one more thing. I mean, if a student or a young professional, he wants to talk and he talks to you like, hey, that I'm really good in this and that, but I'm not able to cope up with my internal inertia, or let's say internal confidence. I'm not able to reach to that my potential limit where I can. So, what are the things? What's the method? How you can explain to that person, like how you can give that pep talk, or whatever we can say, that that can help him.
I think the first one is expectation management. I think sometimes when we've thought a certain way for such a long time, I'll give you actually a really objective example in regards to weight loss and how it relates. So, let's say you've gained weight. Let's say if you've gained 20 kilos over 10 years or 15 years, right? You slowly put that weight on. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, this doesn't sound right. I want to do something about it. Then you start looking at programs, 8 weeks to lose 20 kilos. You want to change yourself in about a tenth of the time that you put on that weight. And it's the same thing with mindset. When we've thought a certain way for years, if not decades, we cannot change that mindset overnight. And there's an amazing opportunity to ask yourself, well, rather than thinking about who I want to be, i.e., that confident, nothing infallible person, ask yourself, who is the person that I don't want to be? So start through elimination. So it might be
Right.
that I'm in a lecture and I know up until now, I've never asked a question. I've never said, I don't really understand that. Would you be able to repeat that? Because you want to start saying, okay, I don't want to be that person that doesn't understand what I've been told. And then I go, back and then I have to look at it and I have to figure things out. Or worst case scenario, you just say, I don't understand it. So I'm not going to try to
Yeah.
understand it. So ask yourself, who's the person that you don't want to be? So for me, and this is something that I think I'll work on for the rest of my life, is worrying about people liking me. So this is something that whether it's like even this podcast right now, I'm thinking in the back of my head, oh my God, everyone's going to listen to me. They're going to think I'm stupid. They're going to wonder why I was asked to be on this podcast. So there's a little voice in the back of my head saying, you sound ridiculous. Everyone's going to hate you. So it's challenging that voice and saying, I hear you. I know why you're there because you've been there for 46 years almost. I get
Yeah.
you. I acknowledge you, but I don't want to listen to you. So, what is that
Right.
voice in your head that's telling you you should be someone who you don't want to be anymore? And start to challenge that.
Right. Right. So one more thing to top of it. So there is a social media that we have right now. So what do you think? Does it impact positively, negatively, or how it impacts the young generation? If we talk about it from self-respect, self-confidence, or let's say uh, productivity in their daily life.
I'll start with the easy one, productivity. I mean, we're all at fault, to escapism part of me, and I'm guilty of it. Would I like to look at social media less? Of course. I mean, I'm addicted to watching funny dog videos, so I don't
Yeah,
think it's that bad. But noticing that, and we can use very objective measures, screen time, to deal with that. But I think in regards to self respect, so self respect based on my research is simply knowing that you're important. Now, the challenge with social media when you're scrolling is everyone, and this is a bias that you have to work, everyone is more important than you. Oh, on holidays, you're eating Italian food as a special treat. Well, they're going to Italy for Christmas. Who are you? Everyone is more
yeah,
important than you. So, self respect, one of the three ways of building it is through something called self authorship. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's how can you make choices so you are the author of your own life? So when it
right.
comes to social media, one of the ways to do that is start asking yourself, those are their choices, what they've done for their life. What are choices that are going to help me be the author of my life? Now, you can use others as inspiration. There's nothing wrong with that. So you can say, as an example, one of my favorite keynote speakers is Brene Brown. She's a wonderful speaker, a storyteller, researcher. And for a long time, I was like, she's so much better than me. She's so much more accomplished than me. And it also started to become very negative in mine. It's like, oh, she must have just been lucky and that's why she is where she is. And I started going into this negative spiral. And then I thought, that's interesting. How can I start asking the question, if I'm jealous about someone else, how can I use that to my advantage? And the answer is, she is now an inspiration to me. Wow, she's worked so hard. She was able to do a wonderful TED talk. She's now traveling around the world. How can I flip that if I'm going to be on social media? How can I flip it to say, this trigger, I'm starting to feel a bit jealous of this person. What are they doing that I can understand better so I can take those steps in my life? Because at the end of the day, you will never, ever get your day back. Today is the only today I'm ever going to have. How am I going to use it by making choices that are in line with my life rather than spending so much energy and so much time being jealous of someone else when I can use them to my advantage? So, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. So with that caveat, now you are the inspiration to many. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
gosh.
the way you were looking to that person and you got inspired, now you're inspiring the new generation. So it's really
Oh,
nice. I mean, once you learn something from someone, you learn by researching yourself as well. So it's really nice that you can impart that to everyone else. So
hmm.
coming to one more aspect, I mean, is negative talk? Do we say that negative talk, or what?
Yeah.
What's the word for that? Yeah. So is it like, what's the fundamental idea behind that when we are talking about negative talk or something? So what's that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I listen to a lot of people. Like, so if I wake up in a really, really bad mood, uh, I listen to someone else who can inspire me and who's positive. And one of the books that I've listened to lately is the one by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And this
Okay.
will come
Yeah.
back into the loop to the negative thinking. But interestingly, he said he's always been a positive person. And and it's interesting, a lot of people think I'm really positive. I'm not. If I were to release some of the thoughts that I have in my head, I would probably end up in prison. I'm actually more negative than I am positive. So it takes me a lot of work to get out of my own head. And I think the
Hmm.
reason why, I think there's two, nature versus nurture. I think in regards to nature, I think that's just a pattern that I've adopted from, uh, you know, family members in that sense. And I think nurture as well is when you're brought up in a household where a bad thing could always happen. My mom comes from communist regime. Prior to that was when Hitler took over Europe. So my great grandmother was affected. So understandably so, she's always like, a bad thing is about to happen. So when you're raised in that environment, I'm always thinking, okay, a bad thing's going to happen. Nothing good is ever going to happen to me. So you're always thinking, well, nothing's going to
Yeah.
work out for me. So, but again, I think the first place to start, if your audience wants to give this a try in regards to understanding their thoughts more, is an exercise called flow writing. It was first validated, I think, in the 1980s by, I can't remember the therapist. But basically, here's what you do. You take your phone, you set the timer for 5 minutes, and you can do this on your phone or with a piece of paper and pen. You start with a catalyst question, which is, how does it feel to be me right now? You press start and you just start writing. You don't scratch anything
Mhm.
out. You don't worry about grammar. Hard when you're a perfectionist, but you just write. It's kind of like opening taps. For
Mhm.
5 minutes, you just let everything out. And then when the timer sounds, you close up the taps and you reread
Right.
what you wrote. That is the most effective way and the most objective way to look at your thoughts, bar obviously having a therapist. It's a
Yeah.
great place to start, just understanding why you think the way you do, and therefore why you behave the way you do, why you make the choices you do. Start there, because thoughts is what going to direct your actions, right? So
Right.
you start there.
Continuing with this approach, so for example, can you give me one instance, like if I do my timer on and I write my thoughts for 5 minutes?
Mhm.
So let's say, give me one instance, like someone wrote this thing, and with this, what he or she can infer, like what is the actionable item on that?
I'll give you my own
Instead of
example.
what?
So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, what happened was with that, emotional breakdown a couple of
Mm-hmm.
years ago, I thought, hey, I'm a mindset expert. I'm going to take my own advice. I'm going to go
Yeah.
to Kmart, get a pretty journal, get a pretty pen. And I was like, oh, I'm going to hashtag self care this, put the
Yeah.
cup of tea. And I was like, I'm going to nail this. No
Yeah.
problem. So I
Yeah.
started, how does it feel to be me right now? And I was thinking the clouds are going to open up and everything was going to be beautiful. I wrote the most profane swear words and the most aggressive thoughts I've ever experienced in my whole life. The amount of apoplectic anger that I was experiencing. And I remember the timer sounded and my couch is there. I threw the journal on the couch and I gave it the double middle finger. So clearly, I had a little bit of repressed anger. Now I asked myself, okay, and please, please understand that it's not like right then and there I had the answer. This is prior to me, going home and getting that distance. But it really made me aware of how much people pleasing or being oh so nice to everyone else does the exact opposite to yourself. The more you try to get respect from others, the worse it is for your self-respect. So this was almost like, okay, I've experienced this before. I've experienced this. Like, why am I at this point in my life? Why have I allowed myself to go down this rabbit hole? And so this anger was a question mark. I wonder. And I was angry. First, it started out with everyone else made me do this and it's everyone else's fault. It's blame, 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 blame. And eventually you had to point the finger back in. What is
Yeah.
the common denominator of all the patterns in my life? That would be me. So
Yeah.
it's starting to ask the question, okay, why is it that I feel this anger? When did this start? When did it get at the peak? When was it the worst? And I started thinking, well, I'm allowing everyone else, when I say allow, I'm quote unquote allowing everyone else to dictate who I am and what I do for a career. And so that was really the catalyst. But obviously, it's a lot of dots to connect to get there. But that's the start, is understanding what is that emotion that you're really experiencing right now, and how can you use that to your advantage to better understand yourself.
Right. So, do you remember any instance from your past? I mean, with like you had any pep talk with someone from your seminars, or so many individual conversations that you do with your clients, customers, or with anyone. So do you remember any particular example that you can phrase out to the audience that can
Yeah.
help them relate what was the problem and how you could explain that problem, and then they could figure out the solution, something of that
Oh,
sort?
of course. And this is the benefit of having someone objective to talk to. So this was a client that I had many, many years ago. I would say sort of like 6, 7 years ago. And she struggled with binge eating. So binge eating is, it's not just, oh, I'm going to go to a buffet and I'm just going to eat a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Binge eating is when you have no control over stopping eating, meaning that you're shoveling food inside your mouth and cannot stop. And I went through this for 2 decades. And I always, when I explained this to my therapist, I was like, there could be, and this is how horrible it is, and this is, I'm ashamed to say this, there could be burning people under a bus and I wouldn't be able to help them because I needed to continue eating. That is
Yeah.
how addictive it is. So this client was struggling with this as well. And the main challenge is she didn't have any of someone around, like in her family or friends, to speak to. So she had me. And I remember telling her, the next time you're about to binge, give me a call. And so I remember she had went to Kohl's, a grocery store, got a whole bunch of food, had it in the trunk of her car. She was in her home's driveway, and she called me and she said, Kat, I have all this food in my back, in my trunk. I don't know what to do. I know I want to stop binge eating, but I just can't. Tell me what to do. Help me. And I said, well, is there anyone home right now? She said, my husband. I said, what would happen if you told him right now, hey, I'm struggling with something. I don't want any solutions. I just want to get this out. I just want to tell you because I can't hold it in anymore. And of course, she was like, that's never going to happen. He's going to be so angry at me because I'm spending so much money. And he's going to say, why can't you just control your eating? This is ridiculous. Like, how disgusting are you? This is what was going on in her mind. But of course, because I'm very good at what I do, she eventually did. So she went to go get her husband, brought him out to the car, opened the trunk, pointed at the food and said, I don't want any solution. I just need you to listen to me. All this food, I'm a binge eater and I cannot control eating. You know what he did? He hugged her while she
Wow.
cried and cried and cried. He didn't say anything. All those bad thoughts never came through. Just hugged her while she
So
cried
this is a
and
part
cried.
of self doubt, like when you doubt and you feel resistant, and then as you said, like she just said to her husband, and the solution was already there.
People have the solutions inside them. People will say, oh,
Yeah.
wow, you've helped me change my life. I haven't done anything. The solution is everyone who is listening right now, they're one, dealing with some kind of problem. They know the solution. They know problem solution. It's like coding, right? If you
Right.
have to do something, you have the code. You just need to figure it out how to put it into the computer, right? You need to figure out that. You have the solution. I might
Right.
be able to, as your teacher and mentor, guide you, but at the end of the day, everyone has a solution inside themselves. So the question is, why don't we do that? And I think a lot of us catastrophize. We think, well, if we do that, what bad thing is going to happen? And of course, that's a physiological response. It's called the negativity bias, when our brains say, we can't do that because a bad thing might happen. And of course, that's a good thing, because if we think, oh, I wonder what would happen if we step off this cliff, we need to know that a bad thing's
Yeah.
going to happen. But the problem is we defer that to everything else in our life. So how can we start challenging those negative thoughts? And sometimes the caveat is they do come true.
Right.
Unfortunately, they do. People are mad at you. People are disappointed with you. But my question is always this: do you want to go throughout your life not having answered that question? That would drive me
Hmm.
nuts. I would
Right.
rather ask that question and have a really crappy answer rather than to never ask that question at all.
Right. So amazing, amazing. So whatever you have explained about social impact, about self um, respect, or we can say how to boost the confidence, how to understand the thoughts coming from within. It can be negative, it can be positive. So we have to focus more on positive, of course. But then negative thoughts will always come. Then, but
Mhm.
it's our duty to understand that there will be negative thoughts. We have to hold them and focus more on positive thoughts, and then we can go ahead with those thoughts. And second, thirdly, you explained about how we can trust each other. Let's, for example, from your instance, like when your client, she is a binge eater, and
Yes.
she was scared to talk to her husband about that stuff. But then when she talked, and it was amazing, right? So it's always about not doubting yourself. Just go there and do some action, and then you might get things done, right? So
That's
that
right.
was amazing. So any particular 2 cents from your end to the audience, finally, if they want to hear maybe in 1 or 2 sentence how to stay happy, how to become more successful in their corporate life? What are the basic things? Of course, keeping aside the technical skill sets and all those sort of things, that's apart from that. Like, what are the things you would say to the audience?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing, and I think objectively you'd understand this, measure. Understand where you're at. And as an example, I have a self-respect quiz on my website, and I've had so many people complete it. And yes, the results are one thing, but they said even just the questions that I was asked have already expedited my understanding of what I do well and what I can do better. So that's a great way to start. And of course, there's many questionnaires out there. You don't have to do mine, but obviously I'll always say that mine is great. And the next thing is, again, eliminate who you don't want to be first before you start thinking, who do I want to be? Process of elimination. And number three is start to ask yourself, why do I make the choices that I make? One of the things that I remember, especially from University of WA doing those talks, so many times I would hear students saying that the reason why they're at university is because their parents wanted them to be there. And I understand this. Education is always going to be a wonderful choice. And I understand why your parents want that for you. But within that, how can you start asking the question, is this what I want to study? Sure, I
Yeah.
understand wanting to be at a university, but is this really what I want to study? Is this what I really see as a foundation for my education that's going to really propel me into a career that I love and that I can't wait to go to work? So it's really getting into, okay, who do I not want to be and why do I make the choices that I make?
That's amazing. So quoting what you said, is it possible for the audience if they can go on your website and submit their question, like answer the questions that you have in the quiz?
Of course, yeah. It's just on my literally, it's a call to action button. It's like a big yellow thing, and it takes about 3 minutes to do the quiz, and you get the results
Okay.
within a couple minutes after that.
Oh,
And you get an
okay. So
18-page guide. Yep, lots of questions, lots of great little.
amazing, amazing. So what I can do is I'll just mention the website. So if people are interested, they can fill the questionnaire and they can get the answers right away. Right?
Of
So
course.
that's amazing. So thanks a lot, Catherine, for answering all my questions. Sometimes it's very hard to answer those questions again and again. I understand that. Thanks a lot for coming on this podcast.